Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Breber and alongside me is Logan Camden. And today, as we sit a little more than a week into the NBA season, we've already seen a bunch of fun and interesting stuff. But of course, this early in the year, you can't just take everything at face value. So what we're going to be doing today is looking at a number of standout starts from teams across the league, from one particular player, be that a good standout start or a bad standout start, and tell you whether we think it's real, that it is going to be sustained, or if we think it's fake and is something of an early season fluke. We're going to start, Logan, by comparing actually two teams out west. Which strong start is more real to you? The Suns or the Lakers? Both these teams are 3-1, and their only losses are to each other, so they're basically undefeated, if we want to be generous. Which start is more real to you?
I think it's the Lakers, and it starts with my faith in the Lakers' two-way ability, right? Anthony Davis has been one of the best players in the NBA to start this year, offensively and defensively. He's putting up 33 points, 12 boards, and 3 assists a night on 64% true shooting with 4 stocks a night. And it's just my faith in Anthony Davis to anchor this team on both sides of the ball that really makes the difference to me. I think the Lakers are going to be the better two-way team. I've been really impressed with this offense. There's more deliberate actions. There's more intent with this offense. J.J. Redick, I really believe in as a head coach. And, I still think the Lakers have flaws, Carson. I think they're really similar to the ones that they had last year. I think they're limited athletically, physically, and defensively in the backcourt a little bit. But, again, I just trust Anthony Davis to make this defense really good by himself, and I think the supporting cast isn't too bad. With the Suns, I still think they're a really clunky fit, and I just don't think they can be an elite defense. Right now, they're number 5 in defensive rating, which is ridiculous. And shout out to your boy, Ryan Dunn. I've been really impressed with him this year, man. He's shooting 44% on 4 threes a night. But the Suns are routinely trotting out at least their starting lineup of Tyus, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, KD, and Yusuf Nurkic. And I think that's a team that can get picked on defensively a lot. They're just undersized. There's not a lot of athleticism out there. Yusuf Nurkic still is your big, getting the most minutes out here. I think is just too limited athletically to make a real difference defensively. And so I just think they're going to come back to earth defensively here soon. Offensively, I'm confident that they're going to figure it out a little bit more. Now, there's been some moments, right? This team will still have their head-scratching moments with turnovers, with late-game execution and stuff like that. But I'm more confident that they're going to figure it out on the offensive end. But I think this start with defense has been a little bit flukish. Ryan Dunn has been phenomenal. I think he's been a huge X factor, a huge addition to this team. Shot blocking, blowing stuff up. There's only so much one player can do and make a real difference in. And, yeah, I think I just believe in the Lakers on both sides of the ball more.
I think that the Lakers start is more real, but I do like what we've seen from both these teams. I do think both these teams are better than last year, but for me, it's really about the offense with the Lakers. I love their offense, and they were really good in the second half of last year offensively, top 3 in offensive rating over the last 45 games, which I think a lot of people overlooked, but they're top 5 in offensive rating early in this year. And an awesome number for them is that they are both top 5 in three-point percentage, and they lead the league in restricted area field goals made. So we know that they exert this overwhelming rim pressure with LeBron and AD. But although they're not a super high volume three-point shooting team, they're a very efficient three-point shooting team. Rui can shoot 40%. D'Lo, Austin Reeves, LeBron last year shot 40%. So they have a lot of good spot-up shooters, and they have a couple of really good pull-up shooters as well. And really the centerpiece of it all is AD. AD's playing at an MVP level, and I honestly don't think it's crazy to expect that to continue. He is more empowered than ever to initiate an attack on offense and is clearly bought into doing so. This is the most consistently aggressive Anthony Davis that we've seen easily since he came to LA, maybe in his career. And when you put him in a true 5-out offense like this with the sort of skill around him that he has as a roller, as a self-creator, isolating, posting up, he's just a monster. And you talk about aggression, the dude is taking 13 free throws a game. I just don't think the league really has an answer for aggressive Anthony Davis, and that's who LA is getting right now. And I think that is clearly the emphasis for this team offensively. So I do expect it to continue. And around him, the skill on offense is excellent. I just think that this is an elite offense. I think the personnel was already really good. And then I think that JJ Redick established some important principles here, right? Empowering AD to do more with the ball in his hands, emphasizing three-point volume, adding more motion, adding more deliberate actions to this offense. So that to me is the real strength of this team. It is that offense. And I also think their bench is solid. I think Connect is very legit. I think that Vincent and Christie is a very solid defensive backcourt for your second unit. I think they can both play better on offense. And I have to give props to Jackson Hayes. I've been legitimately impressed by him, the effort that he's brought, athleticism, defense. I haven't been a big Jackson Hayes guy, but he's giving you really solid 15 minutes a night so far. I do have two concerns with this team, though. And number one is LeBron's regular season effort, because it's bad right now. And this past game against the Suns was really bad. He's just kind of floating through games, and then usually he turns it up in the second half. But if the Lakers want to win a playoff series, and I think that that has to be the bar for them because they're talented enough to do so, seeding is huge for them. This is what we've talked about. You can't end up in the play-in where you're drawing the Thunder in the first round, or last year you draw the Nuggets. They have to be in that 3, 4, 5 range probably. And I'm not sure if they can win 50-plus games with energy-conserving LeBron, who's not leaving close to it all out there every night. Of course, he can't play with maximum effort, but we've seen a particularly slow-starting LeBron early in this season. And my second concern, and this is the bigger concern for their long-term upside, is the entire defense around Anthony Davis. We've talked about their point of attack defense. Rui has his clear limitations at the 3. And this is not getting better unless they make a move. And even with AD dominating on that end, they're just destined to be a very average defense. So I love the offense. I think because this team has 2 superstars when LeBron is locked in, and because they have really good supporting pieces alongside them offensively, and they have JJ as a coach, and they do still have AD defensively, I think that they're a top 5 team in the West. I do think that they really can win a playoff series, but those couple of concerns do hold them back from being real contenders. I do feel better about the Suns, though. And you know why that is, Logan? Ryan Dunn. I mean, how much did I talk about this guy in the preseason? I said he was the key to their season. I called him a top 3 Rookie of the Year candidate. I said he provides exactly what they need so long as something close to his preseason shooting holds up and they're willing to play him. And he has been phenomenal to start this season. He was clearly the best defensive prospect in this class. He has been a hound defensively. All-stars are shooting 26% when guarded by Ryan Dunn. We have seen him do a phenomenal job on Luka, on James Harden, on LeBron James. I mean, he does such a great job of applying back pressure with these rear view contests out of pick and roll. He flies around as a low man. He's just everywhere. He's such a good secondary rim protector, such a good on-ball shot blocker. It's just this incredible blend of perimeter defense and then what he can do on the interior for a wing. It's super early in the season, but he's got a plus 20 on off number right now. They've been much better with him on the floor over a really small sample. And crucially, he's shooting 44% from deep, and he's attempting 10 threes per 36 minutes. Again, this dude was damn near offensively inept as a prospect, right? He was a terrible shooter. He was a terrible free throw shooter. There were no indications that he would improve this dramatically. But once we saw his confidence, his volume from 3 in the preseason, and he was making those shots with a clearly improved jumper, I said, okay, this could be the steal of the draft right here. This probably is the steal of the draft. They started him versus Dallas when Beal was out. I think they should continue to start him. I think what this team desperately needs is more athleticism, much more on the defensive end. And when Ryan Dunn is a solid offensive player, he is the guy who provides the best combination there. I do think their offense is a little bit better than last year, in my opinion. I do think that Tyus Jones brings some stability, and he's been shooting the ball well. But ultimately, for this offense to really take a leap, they would need more advantage creation, need more rim pressure, need more volume three-point shooting. They're going to be a good offense. I don't think they're going to be a great offense. And so at this point, I would just be trying to max out my defensive ceiling and find the best 3-and-D player who I can. And that's what Ryan Dunn can unlock for them. So I do think both these teams can win playoff series. I do think they're both definitely better than last year. I think they're both flawed still, but I do prefer what the Lakers have. And we'll see how much the Suns are willing to play Ryan Dunn. I mean, if they consistently play him 20-plus minutes a night, I'm moved because I think he is exactly what they need.
Yeah, he is 6'8", damn near 7'2" wingspan. Man, he can do it all defensively. And when you think about what the Suns needed, right? Dunn fits that mold too, but Dunn also fits uh, the Suns in terms of like maximizing his offensive output too. When you put him alongside three-star shot creators, his shot quality is just naturally going to be higher, right? Because guys are going to be content with leaving him alone, right? Like you have to divert all this attention to all these superstars. It's just going to make his shots uh, so much easier to make. And I think obviously that was a real focus of his in this offseason between the end of the college season to the draft to the start of the year here. And it's made a real difference. But again, that was all he needed. That's all that Ryan Dunn needed to be an effective NBA player. He had it all defensively, like the best shot blocking wing in the draft, one of the best shot blockers, period, in the draft. It's a really good fit. And like you said, man, I just hope the Suns realize what they have and realize that if it is Tyus Jones who takes the back seat, which is probably the move that I'd make, or if it's moving Beal to the bench and staggering his minutes more, I really hope the Suns make that decision, right? Because some teams can get clouded by the star power and the name value and stuff like that, but fit is much more important. And I agree with you, man. I'd start him. I think they need him on the floor more than, having another scorer. I think he's just more valuable in the rotation.
He'd be rookie of the year right now. I mean, he's been easily the most impressive rookie. Not saying much with this class. It's been a rough go for the young bucks out there, but Ryan Dunn is legitimately ready to contribute to a winning team right now, and he's already doing it. So I think that that's big for the Suns, that they do continue to lean into him. But these are both good teams. I think I've been legitimately impressed by both. But Logan, there's only a couple undefeated teams left out there, and one of them is the Cleveland Cavaliers at 4-0. Is that start from them real or fake?
I think it's pretty real, and some of the numbers just overall are remarkable. They're number 2 in offensive rating right now. They're number 4 in defensive rating, and they're number 3 in net rating. It starts with Evan Mobley's leap. Right now, he's averaging 18 points, 9 boards, and 3 assists on 61% true shooting. Most importantly about that, he's shooting 50% from deep, but it's the overall skill increase we've seen in totality, man. The guy is bringing the ball up the floor in transition. He is playmaking. He is shooting off the dribble threes. He is shooting threes more in general, and he just looks more confident shooting the ball, man. I know we talked a little bit on this in last episode, and I know we've talked about this in volume over the past few years, but this is what this team needed, is more spacing, more skill from their front court. It's just a little clunky, right? Jared Allen is a very simple rim runner, rim finisher. And I think Mobley and Allen have always worked defensively, right? That's a real advantage that they have, having two jumbo-sized guys plant down there. Both can block shots at a really high level. Both can rebound at a really high level. It's just hard driving inside the arc when two guys can cover that much ground, right? So they've always complemented and fit defensively, but it's about making it work offensively. And what we've seen from Evan is really encouraging that this fit overall can work. Because if you remember last year, right, it was the Donovan Mitchell and Jared Allen show when Garland and Mobley were hurt, and they rattled off a bunch of wins when it was just floor spacing around them with the bench mob. And so it made you question, right, should they move off of some of these guys? I have been in very large favor of breaking up this young core, and I don't really feel that way anymore. I think it can work, and not only that, I think the Cavaliers have a real chance at being potentially a top 4 seed in the East, right? I think it's going to take some things breaking their way. I think it's going to take Milwaukee continuing to struggle, which I don't think is out of the question, right? No. Middleton's hurt. They are really lacking depth. We're going to talk about the Bucks later, so I'll save some of that. But it would take, right, the Knicks faltering, who we're going to talk about later, right? There's going to be some things that are going to have to fall in line for the Cavs to get that top 4 seed. But I think it's very, very possible. And another key component of that is Darius Garland progressing back to the mean. And I was really impressed with what we saw from him against the Knicks. 34 points. He put 15 of them up in the fourth quarter. Made 3 3-pointers in that final quarter. Dude, Garland just looks rejuvenated, man. He looks quicker. He looks more in control. He looks more aggressive. And more importantly, he looks more confident. The Darius Garland that we got in the playoffs last year, Carson, and it was a tough matchup, right, going up against the Magic and their great defense. And, then taking on Boston, right? It's a tough draw. But Garland didn't look confident. He looked hesitant to put up shots. He looked like he didn't want to shoot. Dude, he was aggressive out of the pick and roll, hunting shots in the mid-range, getting to floater range and putting it up effortlessly. He just looks like the Darius Garland that, the all-star Darius Garland that we saw from a couple of years ago, way more than the one that we saw last year. And you know what, man, I'll be damned. I like the bench, too, here in Cleveland. I've been critical of your boy, Dean Wade. Dean Wade's kind of a baller. He kind of looks like a...
Why are you bringing him up with the bench? Starter Dean Wade.
Yeah.
And thank God he is starting. He fits perfectly with the starting five.
Dean Wade kind of looks like that Chad meme, man. The dude with the big beard and then the floofy hair, man.
Yeah, he is a Chad. He's a stud.
He is. I also shout out my boy UVA legend Ty Jerome, man. I know his minutes have been up and down. I really like Ty Jerome as a bench ball handler. I always thought Ty was going to make it in the league. Just his IQ, his passing. He's a tall point guard too. He's 6'5". He can just see and make passes that other smaller guards can't. He's not super athletic and physically impactful, but he's sound defensively, right? Like, I think the Cavs have good depth. They've got a really good star tandem up front. They've got a bench scorer in Karis LeVert. Like, I really like the Cavs top to bottom, man. And are they going to be one of like a top 3 seed out east? I wouldn't count it out, but I think top 4 is very, very attainable. And I've really liked what I've seen from them, man. I think that if Mobley can continue this play, if Garland can continue playing like this, I know what I'm getting out of Donovan Mitchell. I know what I'm getting out of Jared Allen. I really think the Cavs have a shot at being a top 4 seed. And again, like you mentioned with the Lakers, that makes a meaningful difference to me when it comes to their playoff prospects. If they host a playoff series, they did last year, right? They won all 4 games at home against Orlando. That was the difference. It could very well be the difference again this year. I really like what I've seen from Cleveland, man. They've really impressed me.
I've been really impressed as well. I think this start is real. They're going to be a top 5 defense. That was never really a question. That's just been automatic for them in the Mobley-Allen era. The questions have always been about the offense, right? Is this going to be an average offense? Is it going to be a below average offense? Can they generate a high enough shot quality in the half court? Is it ultimately untenable to have 2 players in the front court who are as unskilled as Mobley and Allen have been, with Mobley not being a floor spacer over his first 3 seasons, not doing very much offense from the perimeter? This Evan Mobley moves the needle for the Cavs offense. I've been a huge Evan Mobley guy. He was my favorite prospect in his class. This is the offensive development that I've been waiting for, because he showed it in college. He showed the passing ability. He showed more than flashes of the jump shot. He was a fine jump shooter in college. He showed impressive fluidity off the bounce for a player of his size and impressive ball handling. And now we're seeing it. They are running way more offense through him. He has been empowered to push and transition, to be a grab-and-go guy, to initiate a bunch of actions from the top of the key. He's run 17 pick-and-rolls in 4 games, and they're generating more than 1.1 points per possession out of those looks. I mean, it's super impressive what he can do. He just comes around, hits you with the hang dribble, and then he's been effective as a driver, nice body control, pretty good finishing in the lane, but he can also make those passes, right? If a guard screens for him and pops, he can identify that, because he does have that playmaking skill. And he's 4 of 8 from deep, and it's obviously a really small sample size, but he's taking these threes and he's been making them early in the season. And I've been impressed by his post footwork and touch as well. I thought we saw some of that against the Knicks. And he's just been more aggressive across the board. That's always been a big thing with Mobley, and that was the most encouraging thing about the Celtics series to me. We just got aggressive Evan Mobley, and I was very impressed by aggressive Evan Mobley. But also, that was as the center. That was with Jared Allen off the floor, and I thought to see him unlocked offensively, you probably would need to do it with him at the 5. But when he's playing at this level, initiating from the perimeter, I don't think that that's the case. And all the while, as he's doing this offensively, he's destroying the game defensively. Mobley's probably been a top 2 defender in basketball to start this season. I think this is a top 30 player. I think that this is a bona fide star with this offensive growth. I know the volume isn't overwhelmingly different, but look at how he's being utilized. Look at his multifaceted impact in this offense. It's a big difference from last year. And you mentioned Darius Garland, also really impressive against the Knicks. 4th quarter especially, he was shooting the hell out of the ball. It was also some of the best defense I've seen from him. Super engaged, active hands, had a big block on Brunson. I need to see more out of him, because whereas I think we've seen clear skill development with Mobley, I think we just saw a really good game from Garland. And listen, he had a great season a couple years ago and then regressed last year. So I need to see more, but his level will definitely be big in determining how serious this team is, because he wasn't the second option they needed him to be in the playoffs last year. And you mentioned Dean Wade. I much prefer him in the starting five to Okoro. He's a significantly better shooter. He is a damn good defender. It's so interesting. I feel like every time you see like an opposing broadcast, I mentioned this because Clyde Frazier said this on the broadcast, by the end of the game watching Dean Wade, they're like, whoa, I was impressed by his defense. And I feel like that happens to all NBA fans. And I think that really happened to a lot of us last year when he was in the starting five for that extended stretch with Allen and Mitchell out there when Mobley and Garland were out. And he was defending his ass off. He's super switchable, and he can shoot close to 40% from three on high volume. So it's a really good fit for an offense that has always needed that floor spacing to produce better half-court results. And I just want to give props to Kenny Atkinson, because I think he's done a phenomenal job with everything early in this year. I think he's been big in utilizing Mobley correctly and empowering him offensively. He gets credit for starting Dean Wade, where Okoro was starting for a lot of last season. And I also think that in an East where we see so much turnover in a lot of these rosters, right? The Bucks, yeah, they have 1 year with Dame and Giannis, but they're really still trying to figure things out. The Knicks, super overhauled roster. The Sixers we haven't even seen yet, but they're going to be integrating PG and a bunch of new depth pieces who we have seen out there, and they're off to a bit of a rough start, but mostly because they're without two of their three best players. But like within that context, the continuity that the Cavs do have is a real advantage, especially in the regular season. And you're talking about them as a top 4 seed. I can honestly see them being the 2 seed in the East. I mean, the Celtics are going to run away with the conference clearly, but when you have a defensive foundation like this, I mean, that's just so reliable throughout a regular season, right? That's how we see a Grizzlies end up as a 2 seed a few years ago when they weren't viewed as that level of playoff threat. At least I certainly never viewed them that way. But if you are going to defend consistently at a high level, that's big in the regular season, and I think this offense has really improved. So I'm not saying they're going to be the 2 seed, but I think both they and Orlando, right? Scrappy defensive-minded teams who've improved offensively compared to a veteran team like the Bucks, who clearly don't bring that effort every night, compared to the Sixers, who God knows when we're going to see Paul George and Joel Embiid. We haven't seen either one of them. Compared to the Knicks, who I'm more optimistic about, but listen, they're not going to defend at that level night after night. Like, this is a team that's going to take the regular season seriously, and I feel better about them in the playoffs too, because this Mobley and Dean Wade in the starting five raises their offensive ceiling. And if we get a better version of Garland, now we're really talking. But their defense is going to be elite, and everybody outside Boston is legitimately flawed in the conference. So I still think New York, Philly, those teams have higher ceilings come playoff time, right? But Cleveland's not super far off, and they can easily win more regular season games than those teams. And I apologize, because my outlook was basically, we know what this Cleveland team is, and the Mobley leap has changed that above all else. And by the way, there's not a leap in the league that I could be happier about, and that I could be happier to have underestimated in terms of this team's outlook before the year. But I had them in conversations with like Indiana. They're way better than Indiana.
I'm right there with you, man. I did underrate them, and I think I might like them more than – I definitely like them more than Milwaukee, and this is in terms of
playoffs?
I think so, and we'll get into that. I just think Milwaukee is Milwaukee's got a lot of stuff to figure it out. I guess the Middleton injury is really going to determine, when he comes back, what I really think, because we haven't seen Milwaukee at full strength yet, but – I don't think Milwaukee's going to be able to do what Orlando or Cleveland does defensively, man, right? Philadelphia and their injury concerns are still a big red flag about them. And Cleveland, in a lot of ways, is way more well-equipped to deal with injuries to a star or multiple stars. We saw it last year, right? They just have more depth at the bottom. They have more depth at the top, too. And just shout out Kenny Atkinson, man. One, for turning down the job in Charlotte to return to Golden State to, wait on a better job, which... oh my God, he definitely did. But
yeah,
and I liked JB Bickerstaff, but I think it's mutually beneficial, right? I think Bickerstaff got them to where they, I think he gave them a good floor, and I think he's good with young teams. I really like him in Detroit and what he's going to do there a lot more than I like Monty. But I think you're right, man. I got to give Kenny a ton of credit for just how they're using these guys. And Bickerstaff was a little bit more stubborn to give Mobley the leash, but also to play Dean Wade. I think he's a good coach, and I think it's mutually beneficial for both of these squads. But Cleveland's creeping, man. They're creeping into that real contender tier for me out east, man. And obviously Boston is in a tier of their own, but in that next tier, I think Cleveland is either 1 and 2 in that group.
Wow. I think for the regular season, definitely. I think for the playoffs, we'll see. I mean, we'll see how consistent Mobley is. We'll see how consistent Garland is. There's still a real burden on Donovan Mitchell, but I definitely think that this is a significantly better version of the Cavs in terms of playoff outlook than what we got even last year. But you mentioned the Bucks, Logan. And when you look at the Central Division, there's a few teams that we had playoff expectations for. The Cavs are soaring right now. The Bucks and the Pacers, their division rivals, are on the opposite side of the spectrum. They're both 1 and 3. Which of those slow starts is more real to you, Logan? Indiana's or Milwaukee's?
I think they're both real to an extent. I think both of these teams are majorly flawed. We'll get into it. I think Indiana's is a little more real. And the biggest issue to me with Indiana is just the fact that they can't rebound, man. The Philadelphia game to me was really, really eye-opening in terms of what this team's limitations are going to be. In that game, they get out-rebounded 54-37. In the third quarter alone, they got out-rebounded 17-8. They got out-rebounded on the offensive glass 20-7. Like, they got decimated there, man. Philadelphia in this game had a 48% offensive rebound rate. That's absolutely absurd. They shot 14 more field goals than Indiana, and they won the second chance points battle by 14. You're going to lose every game like that. Again, it just spoke volumes to me. Indiana's relatively healthy. You're going up against a Philadelphia team that is down Joel Embiid, that is down Paul George, and you still manage to lose it. And again, it's just because it's a little bit of a mismatch. Philadelphia has a ton of athletes right on the wings, in the front court. If it's Martin, if it's Oubre, if it's Yabusele, who was working his ass off on the glass, right? On the interior, Andre Drummond proved to be a major matchup issue. Like, that's concerning to me. That's not a game you should ever lose when they're not two best players. I think Maxi's better than Paul George at this point in his career, but they're down 2 of their 3 best players, one of the best players on the planet. You can't lose that game, and they just got outworked. I hate using this because it's such a tired cliche, but Philadelphia really did just want it more. I mean, Yabusele's flying around the court in his minutes. The dude couldn't hit a shot all night, and he is still working on the glass, right? Drummond is working. All of these guys are just working. And I thought they rebounded better in this last game against Orlando, but you see their defensive limitations as well in that game, right? I think you see their rebounding and athletic limitations against Philadelphia, but you see their defensive limitations against Orlando. They just lack elite athletic perimeter defenders. They need more of those guys, right? I love Aaron Nesmith as much as anybody loves Aaron Nesmith, right? He's a really good player. But that is like Indiana's only plus perimeter wing defender, and that's a problem when it comes playoff time. That's why I continue to look back on this conference finals run from the Pacers, and I go, it's a little more flukish than I'd like to admit. And don't get me wrong, Indiana could win a playoff series. Their offense is that good, but they're just not a good two-way team. This is not going to be a good defense, and Miles Turner's a big issue with that. That's one of my worst takes ever, Carson. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to apologize to the Nerd Sesh audience.
God bless you, Logan.
I have had 2 really bad takes in the last calendar year. My worst one was last year when I said that I thought the Rockets were better than the Warriors. I don't know what I was doing, man. I was cracked out that game.
You were all hopped up on Mountain Dew. I don't blame you.
I was all jacked up on Mountain Dew, man. And then I forgot Karl Anthony Towns existed, and I claimed that Miles Turner was a top 10 center in the league. Dude, Miles Turner just pisses me off watching him sometimes, man. Like,
you also had him over Sabonis. You didn't forget Sabonis existed, and you had him over Sabonis. This was one of our more heated debates recently because I was shocked. I was appalled. And I'm very glad to see that you've seen the light.
He averages 6 boards a game, and it's just like he's just getting out-muscled and out-efforted and out-worked down there, and he just... I'm coming more and more around to just looking at how Halliburton maximizes these guys, how he maximizes Obi Toppin, how he maximizes Miles Turner. And it's just such a detriment. And I'm angry at myself for the logical inconsistencies that I had with Domas and Turner because I'm always critical of Domas being a bad defender. Miles Turner's also a bad defender, but at least Domas can rebound. It's so hard to win basketball games when your 5 can't rebound. Just a tenet of basketball. When your 5 can't anchor the glass, you're just at a you're working from a deficit. And I think that's going to hold back Indiana. I don't think they're going to make any moves. I think this is their identity. They are an up-tempo, offensively oriented roster that is just going to try to outgun you and outscore you. And it can work, but it's not the best formula. And I think against teams with physical advantages, with athletic advantages, they're just going to get bullied. You know, the Indiana Pacers are like your little brother. Yeah, they're quick, man. They can blow by you a little bit, but you're bigger and you're stronger. And I think against bigger, more physical teams, Indiana is just outmatched. And because it's not about Halliburton. I know Halliburton caught a lot of flack through the first 3 games. He was at 12 points, 3 boards, 4 assists on 32, 20, 57 splits. And he was scoreless against the Knicks. Halliburton's going to figure it out. And he's played a much better last 2 games. But that's not my issue. My issue is the fact that I just don't think they can hold up defensively, and I don't think they can rebound. Those are large components of winning basketball games, and the Pacers just fall short. So I'll get into the Bucks here in a minute. I do think the Pacers start is just a little more real to me. They have more glaring flaws, and they don't have the superstar punch that Milwaukee does have.
I'm with you. I think both these starts are real, but I think that the Pacers is more real, more concerning. They've just looked flat out bad. We know they can't defend. That's no surprise. But as you mentioned, they've also been horrible on the glass. They're 29th in rebound rate. And Hallie has been awful. His last game was solid, but his shot's been brutal. He hasn't been getting good shots for himself. I do think he's going to be fine. I do think this offense is ultimately going to be great. I mean, I am a big Hallie believer. No, he doesn't have the sort of consistent rim pressure or just the consistent scoring assertiveness that you get from a lot of other great guards around the league, but I do think the shooting is exceptional. I do think the playmaking is next level. The selflessness, pushing in transition, the decision-making out of pick and roll, all these things lead to great, great team offense. He has been as bad as any star in the league through 4 games, but that's not my concern with this team, ultimately. I mean, we know how they push the pace. We know the play finishers they have around Hallie. We know how good Siakam is in this offense. We know about their depth offensively. It's just all about the defense, and it's about the rebounding. And like I said earlier, I should not have had them and the Cavs on the same level at all. I shouldn't have had this team 1 win fewer than Orlando, which is where I think I had them, maybe 2 wins fewer. Like, ultimately, this team just can't do serious stuff. They're super fun. They're a great watch when their offense is humming, which it normally is. But when you're awful defensively and you're awful on the glass, you're a first-round exit 90% of the time. And it was a very vulnerable East last year. I don't think anybody viewed that as like a typical Eastern Conference Finals run. But I loved the Hallie Siakam fit offensively. We always knew this defense was going to limit this team in terms of them being contenders. But right now, it's like I can't even put you in the same conversation as any of the top 6 teams out East, because they're either just absurdly stacked at the top with star talent that I think gives them a ceiling that you can't match, or they're just so much better defensively, and they are improved offensively like an Orlando or a Cleveland. So I'm worried about Indiana right now. I think this team needs to get a dramatically better defensive guard alongside Hallie. Shout out Andrew Nembhard. He just can't hang as your primary guard defender, or you need Nesmith out there checking the guard. But if a team has a big wing, then you're screwed. You need Nesmith to be able to guard all of the best perimeter players, and they need to upgrade their defensive center, because I really like Miles Turner offensively. He's just a bad defensive center. I am worried about the Bucks too, though, man. They're 25th in defensive rating right now, and I think that their focus is bad. I think their effort is bad on that end, and I think ultimately their personnel is bad. I was a little bit optimistic about Gary Trent Jr. being a slight upgrade from Malik Beasley defensively, but ultimately we knew that that wasn't going to be a needle mover, and I like DeLon Wright, but how much of an impact can he make as a defensive guard coming off the bench? Like, fundamentally, this team is unathletic around Giannis, extremely unathletic, and not committed to the defensive end. And Taurean Prince is starting right now, and he is a bad rebounding 3. So Chris Middleton would be a little bit better in that role, but like, that's not moving the needle with this defense. It was a bad defense last year. It's a bad defense this year. That puts a ceiling on what this team can do. I'm not worried about the offense. I think that Dame has looked good this year. I was expecting a bounce back from him. I think we're going to get that this year. He hasn't been great from beyond the arc, but he's shooting 69% on twos compared to 49% last year. I do think we've seen him getting downhill. I think we've seen him weaponizing his quickness. And they have him and Giannis, and they'll get Middleton back. Like, that's a lot of star power. That's a lot of rim pressure from Giannis. That's a lot of shooting from everybody around him. This is going to be a really good offense. I just think they have the same fatal flaws as last year. Their defense sucks, and they're poorly coached. And, I mean, they have back-to-back horrible losses before the Celtics game. But then you do take on Boston, and you're hanging in there, and then just the key stretch at the end of the third, they collapse defensively. They're hemorrhaging open looks. They can't stop Boston from creating advantages. And their offense devolved into Giannis barreling into the rim, no matter how much traffic there was in the paint, and he gets an offensive foul, and he has another turnover, and he's struggling to finish because it's such a packed paint. I just feel like this team lacks direction, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if they lost first round again. And I do still believe in their offense. I mean, I mentioned the lack of direction, but like, they were still a really good offense last year. They're too talented. They're too talented with Dame and Giannis and shooting around them. But it's the defense, and I don't think the defense is better. And I don't think it's getting better.
I don't think so either. The Bucks are just too top-heavy right now, and the depth stinks. The depth is horrible. They desperately need Chris Middleton back. He had surgery on both of his ankles, so the timeline for that is, questionable. We don't know when we can expect Middleton back. But the bottom line with the Bucks is Giannis and Dame can't afford off nights. Like, the margin for error is completely eliminated because of how bad their depth is. And specifically when I look at Dame, I am a little bit worried. I was really encouraged by his debut game in our first pod of the year. I earmarked the Bucks as one of my most interesting teams, one of my most intriguing teams. And don't get me wrong, they're very interesting, but I think for the wrong reasons. And when I say that they just both have to pull their weight. And that's a big, big burden for both of your stars. They literally just cannot have off nights. If Dame doesn't have a great game, you're going to lose. If Giannis doesn't have a great game, you're going to lose. 20% of Dame's shots are coming at the rim. That's the lowest mark of his career. That's down 7% from last season. And again, these are small sample sizes, so take these numbers with what you will. But last year was down 3% from the previous 3 years. So from where he was 5 seasons ago, his rim pressure has dropped by 10%. 52% of his shots are coming from deep. That's the highest mark of his career. That's up 7% from last year. And that, again, is also up 3% from his highest other season. So, from like 5 years ago, his three-point shots are up 10%. And 11% of his shots are coming from long mid-range. That's the 100th percentile in the NBA. It's the most, basically, of any player. Basically, what I'm saying is he's just not getting himself easy looks. And I just think Dame has to create more downhill pressure. And I don't even mean that Dame has to get more shots at the rim. I just mean he has to pressure the defense to open up stuff on the back end for Giannis. I think Dame is just limiting himself and creating advantages for the rest of his teammates by settling and not getting downhill. Specifically with Giannis in the pick and roll, I just want him to drive. Even if he's not taking a shot, even if he's kicking the ball back out to the perimeter, or if he is hitting the roll man, he just needs to get downhill more, because what you're seeing is he's not creating advantages and he's taking a really tough shot diet. But it also is a lot of what you said, Carson. This team doesn't have plus athletes. They don't have plus defenders. And I don't want to beat a dead horse, because Carson and I have talked about this a myriad of times on the show since the NBA draft. And I know hindsight is 20/20, but when you look at this Bucks timeline, Carson and I said this on draft night, when you look at their timeline, you are an older roster. Your 3 stars are all over the age of 30, with Giannis, with Middleton, and with Dame. They're not getting any younger. You have an old-ass Brook Lopez on your team. You have an older Bobby Portis. So what would that say to you that you need in the draft? You need a pro-ready, plug-and-play basketball player, and you have to hit with your pick. Because more importantly than anything else, you need a rotation guy that can play minutes tomorrow. Who did they draft? They drafted a project in A.J. Johnson.
Yeah.
And who knows? Maybe A.J. will turn out to be the GOAT. I don't know, man. I don't know, because, hell, I didn't even have that guy graded on my board, man. I didn't think he was a first-round guy at all. But you look at the guys they passed on. The next pick, Keyshawn George. I know he hasn't gotten a ton of burn this season. I really liked him as an immediate 3-and-D guy. He was long, he could defend, and he could shoot a little bit. I really, really liked Terrence Shannon Jr. Again, hadn't got a ton of burn in Minnesota, but played a ton of college ball, really good athlete, can play defense, has a little bit of shot creation, and can rim run. And the most important one, the guy that we've already talked about on this show, Ryan Dunn, goes in the late first round. Man, Carson, wouldn't you love if you were the Bucks to have a really good athletic defender on the wing who could shoot 40% from deep?
It's all they've been looking for 2 years.
Right? And that's why that's when I say that maybe Cleveland will leapfrog them, maybe Orlando will leapfrog them when it comes playoff time, because there's just a bunch of red flags. The depth sucks, the coaching staff sucks, and I'm not really sure that the front office is plugged in on what exactly they need. I don't know who pulled the trigger on that pick. It just doesn't make sense to me, man. It really doesn't. It still makes me scratch my head to this day. And again, I'm going to hold off on making big declarations about the Bucks until we see them at full strength with Chris Middleton. That's going to be a huge component in determining their ceiling. But I don't like it. I don't like it right now. The Bucks have not instilled any confidence in me, in them being a real contender, which again, when you go all in on Damian Lillard and Giannis, the goal is to win a title. Everything else is falling short of your goal.
You make a great point about A.J. Johnson. That was probably my least favorite pick of the first round at the time, and it is just extremely perplexing. I thought that there were two clear routes that they could have gone, because there's been two clear positions of need that we've talked about them having to address. One of that is having a wing who can both defend and shoot, which they haven't had on this roster in the last 2 years. And the other is having a younger, more versatile big than Brook Lopez who can give you a different look. I was a huge Kyle Filipowski guy. He falls to the early second. He played the other night in Utah, played really well. You know why? He's a super versatile, skilled offensive big who can also defend in space, who brings playmaking, floor spacing, just more agile than Brook, right? Would have given you a different look out there, more quality big minutes. And they neglect both of those things to draft like the ultimate project in A.J. Johnson, who I didn't like at all as a prospect. I think that is a great example of just mismanaging the window that they're in right now when you have clear immediate holes and you're trying to take a big swing for somebody who, if he is a guy, it'll be years down the line. I don't like where the Bucks are at. I will give Dame a little bit of credit, though, because I understand the number in terms of the rim field goal percentage early in the year. He has been eating up free throws, though. He's taken 10 free throws a night, and I think some of that is not reflected in the rim attempts because he's drawing fouls on drives there. Obviously not what he was 2 years ago, but I think he's looked a little bit more spry than he did last year. But ultimately, that was never the problem with this team, right? Dame wasn't as good as you wanted in the regular season, but no matter how overwhelming he and Giannis were offensively, this team just wasn't going to be good enough defensively, and they still aren't. All right, let's talk about another team that has been struggling early in the year, Logan, that had high expectations preseason. Out west, the Denver Nuggets, they're 2-2, but their last two wins have been in overtime against the Nets and the Raptors. Is their concerning start real or fake?
I think it's fake, but I don't think anything's going to come easy for the Nuggets this year. The reason I say it's fake, Nikola Jokic is still the best basketball player on the planet. I don't care how tired you guys get of us singing his praises. I still think he is. He's putting up 32 points, 12 boards, and 9 assists on 67% true shooting. He's imposing himself as a scorer, which I really think is the most important thing to this team. They need it more than ever. You think about games down the stretch against Toronto and Brooklyn, clutch buckets, 2 easy post hooks on Nick Claxton. Against Toronto, does the same thing to force overtime. Those are clutch, tough possessions, and he gets basically to his bread and butter look, the easiest shot in his game with ease. And he put up back-to-back 40 pieces against the Clippers in Toronto. Most importantly, his three-point shot is back. He shot 11 of 20 from behind the arc, and he's playing like an MVP candidate. So, for the most part, when you have the best player on planet Earth, I'm going to be pretty okay about your regular season chances. But surrounding Jokic, because we always know that Jokic is going to do his thing, Jamal Murray and MPJ have to pull their weight. Jamal this season is 19-5-5 on 50% true shooting. He's only 7 of 20 from deep. He's got the 7th lowest true shooting percentage of any 15-point per game scorer this season. And MPJ is much in that same boat. He's averaging 13 points on 48% true shooting. He's got the 14th lowest true shooting percentage of any 10-point per game scorer. That's not going to cut it from your basically second and third best offensive players. I think Aaron Gordon has been phenomenal this year. Dude, the fact that Jokic can just dump it to Gordon when he's under the rim and he just bounds up, and it's such
Best
easy offense.
Coordination as a dunker spot finisher in the league. I mean, just his awareness of where he is at all times. I've never seen somebody who is just so effortless with the reverses like that.
Even when he doesn't make it, dude, even when he's just attempting it and he gets fouled, it does. It looks so effortless. And I know we've said this before on the show. I can't think of a more perfect fit to play the 4 spot alongside Jokic, just in terms of what he does, man. But the biggest concern to me is correlated with Jamal and MPJ and his 3-point shooting in general. Once again, the Nuggets are dead last in 3-point attempt rate. And, they're a league average 3-point shooting team. It's not about making a high percentage of their shots. It's about them being matched up against high volume 3-point shooting teams. 3 is worth more than 2. We always talk about this, right? So when you can hit a bunch of those shots, it's just going to swing the game in your favor. I think you see that against Brooklyn. When they're just lacing the ball, it makes your margin smaller. Against Toronto, just 19% of their shots came from 3-point land. That's that's literally 0th percentile. They attempted 23 pointers in that game. 43% of their shots came from mid-range. It's like they just have to increase that volume. Looking at the surrounding pieces, I've been impressed with Christian Brown and Julian Strawther. I think both of these guys have made some rookie mistakes. Last game, Brown had 2 pretty costly fouls against the Nets that could have come back to bite them. Strawther has just had a bunch of moments where you're like, what are you doing, man? Bad passes or bad defense. But Strawther's a really good offensive player. I believe in him as a closeout attacker. He's got, elite touch. I say elite touch. His floater game is so beautiful. He's a really good 3-point shooter. I think you got to play him more minutes. I'm serious. Like, he might even be my 6th man this year above Russ. I'm giving that guy a ton of burn. You desperately need the floor spacing and shooting. And Brown, confidently shooting the 3 ball, giving you really good defense. I think he needs to be more disciplined. I talk about those fouls, but great energy guy. Those guys aren't the problem. And, I don't think that Russell Westbrook is ever going to figure it out. But I think he can provide a valuable role to this team. He put up 22 points against the Nets. He banged some threes. Look, man, Russell Westbrook has a horrible basketball IQ. Like, he is just never going to play. Situationally, Russell Westbrook is one of the dumbest basketball players I have ever had the pleasure of watching.
Literally.
And it is frustrating. But he is one of the dumbest basketball players I've ever watched. I know that some people love Russ, but it's just a reality of him where, like, one stretch in the Nets game, man, I want to say it was end of the first half in that game. Jokic goes off, and the broadcast mentions we've got 90 seconds of Jokic off the floor. And he ends up, I think he hits a 3 at the end of the first half, which ends up making it a little better. But first possession with Russ on the floor. What am I doing with Jokic off the floor? I'm bleeding the clock. I am going to drain every possession. I want us to get it down to within 5 seconds of the shot clock, and then we shoot. I just want to limit the amount of total possessions we have with Jokic off the floor. Russ shoots a mid-range jumper like 5 seconds into the shot clock.
Yeah. Can I make a counterpoint real quick, though, just to that point about bleeding the clock? I'm with you on wanting to limit possessions. At the same time, I think the Nuggets second unit has to get out and run. I think Russ is so much more effective in transition. They don't have the shooting in the half court.
No, I agree.
I'm with you on Russ being very situationally stupid. I mean, he took a one-legged fadeaway yesterday as well, which is just like, great shot, Russ. That's exactly what the offense needs. But I do think that they kind of have to play faster in the non-Jokic minutes.
I guess let me elaborate on what I mean. I don't mean that in general when Jokic is off the floor. I just mean specifically in that situation at the end of the first half when you have a lead, you have 90 seconds until the half is over. That's where I would want to limit possessions. I don't mean that overall when this unit is on the floor. I agree with you. I think that they play better up-tempo and fast. But do that in the third quarter when you've got a long stretch with Jokic out. This is at the end of the first half. Just get to the half with a lead. Bleed the clock out. So I agree with you there, but Russ still provides a valuable role to this team. Even how stupid he is and how frustrating he's going to be, he plays a valuable role. My biggest concern with this team, along with the three-point shooting, though, is defense and rebounding. Specifically, them struggling to contain dribble penetration. Christian Braun can only guard one person at a time. And specifically, I think when you look at the Nets, they provide a really good look into a problematic matchup against the Nuggets, right? Because when you look at this on paper, just name value, you go, oh, the Nuggets should drub the Nets, right? The Nets are the lowly Nets. They might win under 30 games this year. The Nuggets just won a title a couple of years ago, right? But the Nets have two shifty, athletic, bucket-getting guards in Cam Thomas and Dennis Schroeder, and they have long, athletic, rangy defenders. So they can bottle up Murray and MPJ at a pretty high level, and offensively, they were torching Jamal. I have been pretty angry at the effort that we have gotten from Murray defensively. Because, like, I get it, man. There's just physical limitations with Murray because he's not a good defender. He's not super quick. He's not super athletic. But Schroeder and Cam are just burning by him in crucial spots, just blowing by him, where his effort is atrocious. And that's a problem. Like, Christian Braun sure can X out Cam Thomas, or he can X out Dennis Schroeder. That's where the loss, I think you're really feeling the loss of Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, is defensively, not having another guy that can take on lead guards. And then, again, the three-point shooting. Just a really reliable three-point shooter. That's a huge loss to this team. So, ideally, Carson, I think this team needs to make a trade for another perimeter and or interior defender and a shooter. But nothing's going to come easy for this team. Like you said, they go to overtime with Toronto and Brooklyn. Shout out to them for being resilient. That's a tough stretch, man. That's a back-to-back, right, on the East Coast. You're not at home. So credit to them for not just folding up like a lazy boy and giving those teams the games. Credit to them for fighting. You know, they trailed by Brooklyn by 17, right? They could have just thrown in the towel. They didn't. So credit to them for battling back, but they're going to struggle in non-Jokic minutes. I think the bench is better, but it's still objectively bad. We need to see MPJ and Murray play better. But the perimeter defense is also taking a major hit down KCP. Like, that's my big take for the Nuggets, man. The sky is not falling in Denver because they have Jokic, but nothing is going to come easy to Denver this year, man. I think a lot of these regular season games are going to be gritty, them scratching and clawing to close out games. I don't think anything's going to come easy this year, but it starts with MPJ and Murray pulling their weight because I don't know if they're going to be able to figure it out defensively or with the bench.
I think it makes sense to be concerned about the Nuggets because they've been bad. I mean, they have been bad in all 4 games. And I am concerned relative to my preseason expectations was that they were the number 2 team in the West. I had them as my number 3 contender overall. I still don't think I'm quite as concerned as the consensus, though. But to put into perspective their struggles, Jokic over his last 3 games is averaging 37, 12, and 8 on 70% true shooting. And in the clutch, he was perfect against the Raptors and Nets both. He's averaging 7.7 clutch points per game on 86% true shooting. Every single meaningful possession, unless Jamal takes a bad shot that you're just like, come on, Jamal, settle down. I mean, he had the one really nice reverse layup against the Raptors that they needed. But outside of that, it's just get a Jokic post up. He's getting to his righty hook. These teams have no resistance. It's automatic. But he's been amazing, and they are escaping versus these teams that are bad. And unsurprisingly, the first thing you look out there is the non-Jokic minutes, and super small sample size, of course, but they are 29 points per 100 possessions better with Jokic on the floor. It's only been 4 games, but they're minus 28 in 46 minutes without him. The bench is bad. We all know the bench is bad. That's what everybody's been talking about with Denver. The one thing that I continue to emphasize, though, is that their bench is always bad. Their bench has been bad throughout a vast majority of the Jokic era, and I do think Russ will play better. He's shooting 27% from the field right now, and he's playing a little bit much for my tastes. I could go for a few fewer Russ minutes per game, but also Reggie Jackson played 22 minutes per game last year in the regular season, right? It's not uncommon for them to give this 6th man bench ball handler role a decent amount of burn. And he makes a lot of stupid decisions, Russ does. A lot of bad decisions. He's still better than Reggie Jackson. He's still a better defender. He's still a better playmaker. He's such a superior athlete, such a superior transition player, rebounder at the position. And he balled out last game. He was just overwhelming people physically, athletically. So yeah, you're going to have a couple of shots that, good God, you wish you could have back, and a couple of mental errors. There was a free throw 2 games ago, I think it was, where he just did not box out whatsoever, and he allowed a super easy offensive rebound and putback. That stuff is going to happen with Russ, but the standard last year was Reggie Jackson. This team was still great with Reggie Jackson in the Russ role, and I do think Russ is better. And I also think that we're seeing Michael Malone start to stagger the minutes more. They're playing MPJ a lot more with the bench, which I think is smart. I think he is the single guy who should play most with the bench unit because they just need that shooting so desperately. I could go for more Jokic minutes with the bench as well, but MPJ just provides the thing that group needs the most. But yeah, I mean, this bench group has real limitations. Dario Saric is a bad backup center, right? He's kind of playing out of position there. But you know who's worse? DeAndre Jordan. And it would be great if the Nuggets had Durant Holmes out there, who they drafted to fill in this role, who would be way better than both, but they don't. So the backup center situation isn't good. The lack of shooting in the second unit is apparent. And as we talked about after the Nuggets opening game, I would be looking to trade Peyton Watson just to get a more capable shooter in that role. Shout out Peyton. He's a hell of an athlete. He competes defensively. They need shooting with that second unit. But Strother is shooting well, and I do like him. And I just think that this bench, in relation to bench units past, is kind of being blown out of proportion. Like, the Nuggets benches are always bad, and Russ will play better, and they'll continue to stagger the minutes more effectively, and they could make a move for a decent bench shooter. That's not a big ask. I think there are other things that have been problems for them that I'm not as worried about long-term that have been as much, if not more, of factors than the limitations of this bench. For example, Jamal Murray has been bad. He's been borderline awful. And the reason I say borderline awful is because the offense has been bad, right? You mentioned how inefficient he's been. He's taken as many shots from mid-range as he has from 3. I love his mid-range game. It hasn't been falling this year. I think he has to get a more efficient shot diet, and that's not going to mean that he suddenly becomes a better athlete, gets to the rim more. Let's just trade in a couple mid-range looks for a couple threes per game. But it's been defensively. I mean, he has just been horrible on that end of the floor. And MPJ has been bad because he's been missing his shots, shot better last game, but he's also been bad defensively. And the Nuggets' effort overall has sucked these last 2 games. They came out so flat versus the Raptors, and they were getting crushed on the glass in the first half. And they had 16 turnovers. They were sloppy and careless with the ball. That's uncharacteristic for them. Their defensive effort versus the Nets was horrible. Brooklyn also shot the shit out of the ball. I mean, Cam Johnson was just lighting them on fire, right? There was a ton of impressive shot making from Brooklyn, but it was a bad defensive performance from Denver. They need to fix those things, right? They can't walk into these games arrogant and just presume they're going to waltz away with a win because they've had to lock in. They've needed Jokic to put them on their back to escape, to avoid an 0-4 or 1-3 start to the season. But I'm ultimately not too worried about that stuff long-term, just the focus and effort stuff with Denver, because we've seen them lock in, right? We saw a title run 2 years ago. We saw them win 57 games last year. That's not something that is characteristic of a problem of theirs, big picture, right? I just think that they've started this season kind of lazy and slow in those categories. And the good news is Christian Braun is hooping. Like, I still would love it if he were a more confident three-point shooter. He knocked down a big one against Brooklyn to basically clinch the game. He was left wide open. I mean, naked. But hey, he took it and he made it. But he's only taken like 3 a game. And that's probably just the reality with him. And if he can take 3 a game and make 37%, you probably live with that. It's obviously a downgrade from KCP. And this team does need more three-point volume. But I don't know that we can just expect Christian Braun to completely change who he is as a player and as a shooter. But outside of that, I mean, he's been awesome, right? Cutting, running the floor in transition, defending his ass off, attacking the glass. He is a basketball player. He is a good all-around basketball player. So I think that it's been an encouraging start from him compared to expectations. The shot, again, is the biggest red flag, but that's been okay these last couple games, and everything else has been good. And so Jamal and MPJ have sucked. Your focus and your effort have sucked. Russ has been comically awful. And still, You've escaped with a couple wins. Your starting five has a plus 12 net rating, and that's the biggest thing to me, right? That's always been the strength of this team. Not to beat a dead horse, but their bench was horrible last year. It's about having an elite starting five, having that offensive formula, defending at a higher level than they have early this season, but that we know they're capable of. KCP to Christian Braun is not the downgrade that should change this team's defense. Christian Braun is a really good defensive player, and I still think it's a top 3 starting 5 in basketball when these dudes play like they're capable of. And if you believe in that group, and if you believe in Nikola Jokic as one of the greatest floor raisers in the history of this game, as arguably the greatest offensive player in the history of this game, then I think you should still think this team is going to be really good. And personally, that's what I think. And there is a lot of discourse about the sky falling for this team and them having to scrap to get into the playoffs. Need I remind you all of the teams that Nikola Jokic won a playoff series with in 2021 or dragged to a 51-win pace when he was on the floor in 2022? There was no Jamal Murray. There was no MPJ. There was no KCP. Like, I get that that's not the standard for this team to win 50 regular season games and then lose first or second round. And, like, I want to be clear, the Nuggets have been bad, so they have to be held accountable for that. My point is just some people are acting like they're going to suck, and I don't think that's the case. They're going to win 50 games. Now, OKC is way better than them. So from that perspective, this is a disappointment, considering where Denver was 2 years ago. Letting Bruce Brown walk, they couldn't have matched that offer. Letting KCP walk, they tried, we were told, and KCP just wanted to go to Orlando. But nevertheless, they lost a couple really valuable pieces there. But versus everybody else, nobody in the West has moved me enough to put them above Denver. I think things are going to continue to look better for this team, and I'm not panicking. Am I concerned? Sure. Am I panicking? No.
Classic Carson Jokic rant. I just found some more crazy Jokic on-off numbers. You know, it's normally like around 20 to 25, his on-off number. Yeah. This year, again, small sample size, 4 games. They're 39 points per 100 possessions better with Jokic on the floor. They're 43 points per 100 possessions better offensively.
Yeah, the offense has been the disaster with the second unit.
I mean, just, wow.
Yeah. One more stat. Can I give one more crazy Jokic stat? I saw somebody tweet this out the other day. They said there's only one player in history who has done all of these things. Had a 25-15-15 game, had a 40-point scoring game with 1 free throw made or fewer, and had a game with 7 made threes. It's Nikola Jokic, and he's done them all in the last 3 games. How about that?
That's absurd. I asked you a variation of this question, I think last episode, but what is the most important need for this team if you could only make one move?
One bench shooter.
Over an interior or perimeter defender. Do you think it's
where are they going to find the backup center? Well, They've been trying to find the backup center. They found him, Durant Holmes, and he can't play this year.
That's what I was going to say is I don't know if it's worthwhile like trading because I think Holmes is going to be a good fit when he gets healthy.
Yeah.
If it's worthwhile moving Holmes or Watson to get somebody else this year, but
Holmes and Watson? Come on now. Come on, how about that?
That was not
what a coincidence. Did you ever see that movie with the great Will Ferrell?
I did not. I heard it was not great. I heard it was
John
not great.
C. Reilly? It was awful. Terrible. One of the worst movies I've ever seen. I saw it in theaters, though.
Good on you. You sat through the whole thing?
I was supporting local cinema. I did sit through the whole thing. There were a couple funny moments, but it was mostly a complete disaster.
What do you think about, like, DFS? Like, watching him play against him, I was like...
How? How are they going to make that happen?
I mean, the Nets aren't, like... What do the Nets need DFS for?
Well, what assets are the Nuggets giving?
I don't know.
Are they paying
Peyton Watson? I don't know. Peyton Watson in the second or something? I don't know, man.
That's not close. DFS is good, dude.
No, DFS is very good. That's why I throw him out because he'd be an awesome rotation piece.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just tough because they've given up their 25 first rounder, their 27 first rounder, their 29 first rounder. I don't know. You give the 2031 first and Peyton Watson and a second, but they've given up most of their seconds too. I don't think it's going to be something like that. And also, they'd have to match salaries, and you're not matching salaries with Peyton Watson. I don't know. I'd have to look more into something like that. I'm thinking more like, see who you can get on the cheap. See who you can get just to be a bench shooter. See if you can get Malik Beasley. That's the guy who I mentioned last episode, somebody like that. And I do think that's the biggest thing because, look, we've seen them survive bad center non-Jokic minutes. At the end of the day, they probably will not play a center in the playoffs. Dario probably will not see the floor. They will probably go with Aaron Gordon as their small ball 5, and that'll work well enough for, the 7 minutes a game that Jokic sits. Jokic is going to play so much this year. I mean, he's going to play like probably 37 minutes a game, but he can hold up. I don't know. He's the most durable star in the league. His conditioning's great. I'm not worried. There are certain dudes who you just like think of as being sort of invincible physically in terms of they just never get hurt, and Jokic is one of those dudes. So until I see that he's overworked, I'm not too worried about that being a problem for him. I have seen a couple people mention this, Logan, and I actually think that it's a real possibility. It would be funny if Jokic just has like legitimately the greatest statistical season of all time, and so there was all this talk about how he can't win MVP again, he can't win 4 in 5 years, and it ends up being that they're just like, this is an insane carry job. You get the 3 seed with this team that now everybody is viewing as a shit show around him, and Jokic has his best scoring volume season ever, right? He pushes 29, 30 a game on insane efficiency, and he wins MVP because of that. That'd be pretty funny, I think.
If he earns it, my thing is always, I don't think voter fatigue should be a thing, man. I think you give it to the best dude who performs the best, and it just so happens that Jokic just continues to do this stuff. Like it's kind of like the NFL to me. It's like people talking about Lamar winning MVP. I do think it's unique this year that he has Derrick Henry in the backfield, so that works against him in his MVP case. But like if Lamar were to earn it again, well, then we give it to him. I don't think that should really factor in. But, I mean, damn, dude. If the Nuggets get to the 3 seed or the 2 seed with this, that being said, though, I just don't expect Jamal and MPJ to continue playing this bad, right?
That's what I'm saying. I think that this group is still better than they get credit for. And they haven't played like that through 4 games. So, they don't deserve to just have credit given to them necessarily. I'm just saying my honest opinion is that this team is going to look a lot better down the line. Does your favorite NBA player have what it takes to be crowned king of the court? Find out at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA.
DraftKings is offering $1 million a day in bonus bets for the first 10 days of the NBA season. That's $10 million in bonus bets. Here's how to shoot your shot. Opt in and get a daily NBA Profit Boost token. Pick a pregame NBA player prop to boost. If that player leads the league that night in points, plus rebounds, plus assists, you win a share of the $1 million in bonus bets.
Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code NERDS. That's code NERDS to win a share of $1 million in bonus bets if your player is king of the court. Only on DraftKings, the crown is yours. Let's go elsewhere in the West, Logan. Let's talk about a team who I saw in person last night. I got to go to the Warriors-Pelicans game. No Steph Curry, no Andrew Wiggins. Did not matter. A Warriors win all the same, and the Dubs are sitting at 3-1. They destroyed the Blazers and the Jazz in their first 2 games. Is this strong start real, or is it fake for the Dubs, Logan?
I think it's a little fake, and I don't want to rain on the Warriors parade. The numbers are staggering through 4 games. Number 3 in offensive rating, number 2 in defensive rating. They're number 1 in net rating right now, and I still believe in Steph Curry to lead a team. I want to give credit to the guys last night, man. They played great versus New Orleans. Like, that's a resilient win without Steph Curry. They were down 20 in the first half. I thought this was a Warriors team that, without Steph, could have just called it a night, thrown in the towel. The ball movement was phenomenal. Buddy, Lindy Waters, Draymond running the show, Kyle Anderson, everybody deserves props. Pods, like, it was a really good performance. And I've been impressed with the defense. That's the one area where I've really been impressed with. Hunting loose balls, smart and timely double teams. They seem really connected, really aggressive. The reason that I'm skeptical about this start is just how comically limited they are physically and athletically. The tallest guys on their roster are Trace Jackson-Davis and Kevon Looney at 6'9". And outside of those 3 games, who I don't really take any of those teams serious except New Orleans. Portland's not a serious team. Utah's not a serious team. New Orleans is kind of serious.
Well, and of course they're without DeJounte Murray and they're without Trey Murphy.
Yeah.
In this game.
But the one game where we actually saw them against a team that I'm growing higher on, the Clippers, they had no answer for Big Zoo. And I just think when Golden State runs into a team, any team, with a big body 5 like that, with an athletic freak, I don't think they can match up. I don't think there's anybody that can really match. I want to give credit to Draymond, too, for defending Zion down the stretch late. I thought they really did a good job on him in the fourth quarter. But, like, specifically against guys like Jokic or like Zubats, I just don't know if the Warriors have an answer for that. And
Anthony Davis.
Yeah, I mean, just they're small. The Warriors are small and unathletic, and very much similar to, like, the Pacers. Like, the Pacers are unique because they just don't play defense, right? But, like, physically how they match up with other teams, that's how I think about the Dubs. And so, good on them for the hot start. I do like their depth. I think this is a team with a lot of lineup combinations, with a lot of really good basketball players here. You know, I like that aspect of this team, but that's the one area where I really worry about the Warriors, man, against big physical bodies. I don't think they can hold up, man. I think they're going to get out athletic. I think they're going to get out rebounded, and that's where I really worry about this team. But I think that the Warriors are going to be solid. I think they'll probably be a little bit better than I projected them. I think I picked the Warriors to finish with like a 500 record. I think they'll probably finish a little bit better than that, but that's still the thing that keeps them from being anywhere close to a real contender to me. They're small, they're unathletic, they're not super physical, and I think that's going to come back to bite them.
I think that the lack of size is something that we've seen be an issue in recent years, right? Especially as the West has gotten bigger and you think, okay, if we are going to do something, we have to go through the Nuggets. We have to go through the Timberwolves. We have to go through the Lakers. Probably one of those teams. Those are difficult matchups for the Warriors. I mean, even the Kings now, right?
Even like Houston this year, you know, I think that Golden State might get, you know, not like that'd be a competitive game, but there's so many athletes on that team.
And I mentioned the Kings. Obviously, we saw them knock out the Dubs in the playoffs last year, or in the play-in, I should say. But the most glaring issue in that game was the lack of a real second shot creator. And that is not an issue that has been addressed on this team. However, I really think the answer to this question, is it real or is it fake, depends on your expectations, depends on if you're looking at the fact that they're number one in net rating right now and saying, oh my God, they're going to be a contender, then it is fake. But if you're totally writing it off, I wouldn't do that either. I think it's somewhere in between real and fake. I definitely think this team is better than last year, and the biggest reason for that is that the depth is phenomenal here. And I liked the moves that they made on the margins. I mean, I liked bringing in Buddy Hield. I liked bringing in D'Anthony Melton. I liked bringing in Kyle Anderson, but I maybe didn't like it enough in totality. And particularly Buddy has just been unleashed here and is an absolute dream fit in this offense, which, by the way, is a beautiful offense. And I'm starting to think Steve Kerr might be the most underrated coach in the NBA, Logan, or overhated, maybe would be the better way to put it. But I thought that last night was just a beautiful demonstration of how effective his offense is without Steph, so long as you have shooting and you have a big who can facilitate out of the post like Draymond can. I mean, they were just running split actions over and over again, which is really the basis of a lot of their offense. For anybody who doesn't know, that's when you throw an entry pass into the post, then you screen for another player on the strong side, the guy who just threw the entry pass does, and then you just move off of that, right? You can curl over top, get open for three. If they overplay that, you can cut. If two guys go with the shooter, if he's a particularly dangerous guy, then the screener can just roll, right? I mean, there's a bunch of different opportunities to get open out of that, and it's a very effective way to create offense when you have good players in terms of moving without the ball and shooting, but you don't have creators off the dribble, which is what the Warriors had last night. I mean, Brandon Podziemski was their best creator off the dribble. That's not a serious NBA offense, and still they got a lot of good shots up against the Pelicans. And that's the ideal system for Buddy, right? I mean, when you are just moving without the ball like this, and there's such an emphasis on creating three-point shots off ball, and there's so much player movement, he thrives. And there's so much ball movement, and he's just been phenomenal to start the year. I mean, he's 21 a night on 56% from deep, bro. Truly one of the greatest three-point shooters we've ever seen. I also think D'Anthony Melton, who didn't play last night, but he's a really good all-around guard. Long, defends, gets you deflections, can play make offensively. He'll shoot better. And I mean, shout out Lindy Waters, dude. This is a guy who was unbelievably good last night and who I do think is a legitimate NBA rotation player who is athletic, who competes pretty well defensively, and just has a butter smooth shot. I mean, shout out to that one lady in the interview who said that Lindy Waters III was her hall pass. You remember that? Phenomenal choice. I mean, he's not bad to look at either, but God, he is butter smooth with the shot. So I like the depth here, and I do think this team can really defend. And a big part of that is Andrew Wiggins, who's just been awesome early this season. He's been super engaged defensively. He's been rebounding well. He's been shooting the hell out of the ball. And Draymond Green just anchors good defenses. Man, he can't make you an elite defense on his own, but he's the smartest defender on the planet, and he's everywhere as a helper. And because of that, I think that this is going to be a good defense. And I think that they're starting to figure out the fit with these guys as well, because Kuminga was starting early in the year. You had a Kuminga, Draymond, TJD front court starting. I didn't like that. There's just not enough shooting in that group. But now Kuminga has been moved to the bench. I think that's 100% the move. I think Pods should be starting going forward. I think you prioritize defense, you prioritize shooting, you prioritize having another ball handler, a secondary playmaker with your starting five. That's Pods. His three hasn't been falling early this year, but he's such a good, impactful basketball player who does so many different things for you. Kuminga's just not a good fit with the starting five, and he played by far his best game of the year off the bench. He was legitimately in the second half awesome against the Pelicans there. They need a little more creation. He can weaponize his athleticism and overwhelm some second units instead of being sort of shoehorned in and maybe forcing the issue a bit when you're playing in a group that has Steph Curry and really just needs shooting and a more engaged, consistent defender in your role. So they're figuring some of this stuff out. Can they be a scrappy playoff team? Yes, I think that they can. I had them winning 43 games. I had them losing in the play-in. But Steph is a hell of an offensive engine. Dre is a hell of a defensive engine. When you have good depth and when you have good fits, and that's what they have here with Pods, with Hield, with Melton. These are dudes who fit in the Warriors' offense in particular, but Pods and Melton play both ends of the floor nicely. You can be a playoff team. But there's still a very clear ceiling on this team, and that's where the size, athleticism limitations do come into play. That's where the shot creation around Steph, the lack of it, does come into play. They're better than last year. Would I expect them to win more than 46, 47 games? No. Do I think that they can win a playoff series? It's hard for me to see. I still prefer the Lakers and Suns if we're talking about some of these strong starts. Are they real or fake? I just think those teams are more talented fundamentally. Let's go out east, Logan. The New York Knicks are 1-2 to start the year. We saw them get shredded on opening night by the Celtics. Is this real or fake?
I think it's real.
Ooh.
I think it's just going to take some time to figure out the fit. And when I say real, I don't know what this team is going to look like playoff time, but right now it's very real. I don't think this is like a quick fix, slap some duct tape on it, we're going to figure it out. I think they need Mitchell Robinson back. Karl Anthony Towns at the 5 has been a disaster playing defense. This team is number 29 in defensive rating, and specifically
that's all the Celtics game, though. That's all the Celtics game. The last two games are like top 5 in defensive rating. They just had a disaster class against Boston.
They've got a 122.7 defensive rating with Karl Anthony Towns on the floor, and players are shooting 11% higher than their average field goal percentage at the rim against Cat. I just don't know if it's a mental thing. Cat is adjusting to playing the 5 again. His tendency just seems to be he hesitates to contest shots. It's like he prefers to box out instead of going for it. He really struggles defending the pick and roll. I'm just really worried about Cat defending the 5. I think they're going to figure it out offensively. Offense hasn't been the problem.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think they're going to figure it out offensively. I just think there's going to be an adjustment period with Cat at the 5, and when Mitchell Robinson comes back, I guess it'll be better. I don't know. Do you start Robinson and Cat together?
No.
I don't know, man. I don't know if the defense has been the identity of this Knicks team for a while, and I just think their identity is going to be different with Cat at the 5, man. I don't think they're going to be a good defense with Cat at the 5, and I think that hinders their expectations, I don't know if I'm going to view them as the number 2 team to dethrone Boston. I think they're the second most talented team on paper, but is the fit right, I guess is the question. I don't know, man. I have very little hope that this defense is going to be great with Cat at the 5, man. I'm really worried about that. That's my biggest concern with the Knicks, and that's why I think this is real. I think the defense being this bad is kind of real. I just think Cat puts a hard ceiling on how great your defense can be with him at the 5.
I don't totally disagree. I think that Cat is a below-average defensive center. I think that this is going to be a pretty average defense, but I don't think it's a bad defense. And I think that the Celtics game was a disaster in a lot of ways. First of all, you're facing the best offense in your conference that had a historic shooting performance, and that is a really, really hard matchup for you. They can't beat Boston with both Brunson and Cat on the floor, and those are their 2 best players. So they're not beating Boston, right? It's just 2 vulnerable points defensively that you can't afford against a team that's so skilled everywhere, that's so incredible at creating advantages, facilitating the drive and kick offense. They're so good as shot makers. So yeah, that's real. But since that game, they destroyed Indiana, and then they lost a close game to a good Cavs team, in which I didn't think that their defense was bad. And in the first game, like, Cat was bad, but also Mikal Bridges was bad against the Celtics. He was getting lost trying to navigate screens. I thought it was an uncharacteristically bad performance from him. So the defense has looked better these last couple games, and their offense is really good. Mikal, who had so much discourse throughout the offseason about his jumper and struggled in the first half against the Celtics, he's been phenomenal on offense since the first half of that Celtics game. He's looked really, really nice. He's been getting his own shot. He's been smooth as a jump shooter. And I think that this is a great offense. I mean, I just think that they have so much shooting on the floor. They have an elite perimeter creator in Brunson. They have a great play finisher and floor spacing 5 and Cat who can play make. It's going to be a really, really good offense. Top 5-ish offense. Deuce McBride has been awesome. I've always been a fan of his, but he has emerged and is playing his best offensive basketball ever, I would say. And he's really valuable for this bench unit. But the rest of this bench is a concern. There's just no question about that, right? They're playing a bunch of inexperienced dudes. I mean, Porty has been like maybe their second best bench player out there. That's not good. When Mitch is out there, I think this is going to be a 7-man rotation come playoffs. I think the starters are going to play about 40 minutes. I don't know,
Tibbs.
actually. They might need to get an
Tibbs.
8th in there. Classic Tibbs, dude, but it's like they don't have a bench wing who I want to see on the floor in a playoff series.
Josh Hart?
Josh Hart's starting. They don't have a bench wing is what I'm saying. You have a backup point guard. You have a backup center. Who is the wing who you're playing to give your starting wings any break?
Dadier, man. Come on, he's going to be great.
Dadier? Well, I know Dadier is next up. I don't think that it should be Dadier, but there are a couple concerns with this team. I'm not as high on them as I was preseason, but I think overall I need to see more before I'm hitting the panic button on the Knicks, because I think this offense is awesome. I think this defense is going to be fine. I don't think it's good. I think it can't hang against Boston, but against everybody else, you know, can they throw enough of an offensive punch to overwhelm them? I think that's very possible, and I do think they're still just figuring out the fit. I haven't really been moved to real concern with the Knicks, so I will say that this is mostly fake. Real or fake, Logan? The OKC Thunder have the best defense in the league.
Yeah, I do think the Thunder have the best defense in the league, man. Right now, as it stands, they have the #1 defensive rating in a single season all time. They're #1 in blocks per game in a single season all time. And they're #4 in steals per game all time. Specifically, when we look at this last game they played, they held Atlanta, who is routinely one of the best half-court offenses in basketball because of Trae Young. They held them to a half-court offensive rating of 62.9. They forced 12 steals, they had 13 blocks, and they forced Trae Young into 10 turnovers. There's just nothing easy with this team, Carson. Like, basic stuff. They're blitzing entry passes and roll men, jumping passing lanes, active hands on ball. And there's just a plethora of elite perimeter athletes here. Caruso, Kason Wallace, SGA, Wiggins, J-Dub, and they're anchored by one of the best rim protectors in basketball in Chet Holmgren. Everyone seems to be eternally locked in There's zero liabilities. And the thing that I think makes them the most dangerous, Carson, is how dangerous they are even when they're beat off the dribble. Like, this team has so many trailing blocks and back tap steals. Like, SGA will get beat off the dribble and he'll block something from behind. Caruso, the same thing. It's unreal, man. I think this could be one of the great defenses of our lifetime. And the most important aspect of this is that they're doing this down 2 backup centers. They're without Isaiah Hartenstein. They're without Jay Will. Like, I think they're going to be even better when those guys are healthy, especially Hardenstein. This defense is going to go up even another notch. Yeah, I think they've got a potential to not only be the best defense in the league this year over the likes of Orlando, of Cleveland, of Boston. I think they've got a opportunity to be the best defense of our lifetime, man.
They are unbelievable. I think the Thunder absolutely have the best defense in the league. They are the most disruptive defense on the planet by far right now, and potentially the most disruptive defense we've seen in a long time. You mentioned some of the insane numbers. They have a defensive rating of 90.8 right now. They're forcing 20.7 turnovers per game. They have 12.3 steals per game, 10 blocks per game. Opposing teams are shooting 48% in the restricted area, dominant on the interior, and they're dominant on the perimeter. Just to shout out some of the individual players here, Cason Wallace and Alex Caruso are second and third in the league, respectively, in deflections per game, and Chet and SGA are numbers 1 and 2 in stocks per game. They're both averaging more than 5 combined steals and blocks per game. And just look at what they've done to some of the great offensive players in this league. Look at what they did to Jokic in the season opener. They held him to 13 field goal attempts, which is honestly just the biggest accomplishment that you can have right now. We've seen what he's done as a volume scorer to teams over the last 3 games. They doubled the shit out of him. They made every catch hard as hell. Chet was getting in there and deflecting balls with his length. Lou Dort had a beautiful play where he got in the way of an entry pass. And then against Trey, I mean, these are both great offensive players, but opposite sides of the spectrum. They force him into 10 turnovers, and they just threw awesome perimeter defenders at him for 48 minutes. They brought hellacious ball pressure, just did not let him have a single easy possession out there. The perimeter defense here is unbelievable. They contest every pocket pass. They contest every laydown pass. They are so long. They are so athletic. They apply great back pressure. They're all so long on these rear view contests. They are liable to block you from behind, trailing out a pick and roll every time down. They apply insane ball pressure. They can double and recover better than anybody else because they just fly around. They are built to wreak havoc on every NBA offense. Like, it is not a personnel specific thing. They have a group that can give every NBA offense nightmares. And Chet has been the best defender on the planet so far through 3 games. But like, he's been unbelievable as a rim protector. He's been phenomenal as a rebounder. He's grabbing 13 a game, and he's had to face some big boy centers, Vooch and Capella and Jokic. He has more than held his own on the glass at the 5, which last year was a real issue. I'm not just going to say that he's figured that out, because I do think that's still a question that you have about him at the 5, but he's going to mostly be playing the 4 this year, and it is definitely an encouraging sign at the least to see how much he's been down for the fight on the glass early this year. And I don't think it's hyperbolic to say that with how Cason Wallace is playing defensively, this team has 4 all-defense caliber players, with Caruso, with Chet, with Lou Dort, and with Cason. And then you have J-Dub, and you have SGA, and Hartenstein hasn't even taken the floor yet. There are just so many elite defensive combinations here, more than anybody else. 2 big looks. You can mix and match the perimeter personnel here as much as you want, basically. This offense is great, but this defense is absolutely the backbone and the superpower for this team. This has the potential to be the best defense we've seen in a long time, and they are just incredibly fun to watch, dude. I mean, they do not relent on these teams. And Chet Holmgren, the centerpiece of it all, my pick for Defensive Player of the Year before it all started, he is absolutely phenomenal, but I do really think he and Hartenstein complement each other super well defensively. Hartenstein brings some more of that grown man physicality. Chet fights. He embraces physicality. He's just slighter, but Hartenstein will solidify things on the glass. He's another great rim protector, but he also guards relatively well in space, and he's got great hands. And I think Chet as the roamer, as the 4, will be great And I also think that he'll dominate in his defensive minutes at the 5. I don't know, man. It's just, you think about what they can do against big teams going too big. You think about what they can do against perimeter-centric teams going Chet at the 5. It's bad news for all of them. And by the way, I just made a video on Chet and the incredibly impressive level that he's been playing at early in this season. So if you want to check that out, that's on our YouTube channel. Dove into his defense, but more so his offense, because that's really where we've seen some growth this year. He's just playing like a bona fide star. He's playing like a top 20 guy. I don't think it's unreasonable to expect him to maintain that. I couldn't be higher on Chet. I couldn't be higher on the Thunder. But I mentioned Chet, Logan, and he is not the only top pick from his draft class who has been grabbing headlines with his play early this season. Paolo Banchero, Logan, had a light 37 in the first half the other day, ended up with 50, 13, and 9, I believe, against the Pacers. Is his leap real or fake?
Oh, it's very real. It's very real. And on the year, he's averaging 29, 9, and 6 on 48, 39, 64 splits. The biggest difference is how much he's attacking downhill. I know we talked about this a little bit on last episode. 43% of Paolo's shots are coming at the rim. That's a career high for him, up 8% from last season. And he's attempting 13 free throws a night. That's also a career high, nearly 2 times the amount from last season when he was attempting 7. I also like that he's creating easy offense for himself, not only on ball, but he's also weaponizing himself as a roll man more, which is just, again, just going to create easy offense for Orlando in general. The strength and physicality he's playing with, though, is remarkable. Against Indiana, like, I sent you this, I'm assuming you saw it anyway, but he's got this one bucket on Isaiah Jackson where he gets into the lane and bumps Jackson at the free throw line with a little chicken wing and dunks on him. Like, Isaiah Jackson is a big, strong, athletic dude, and Paolo just completely disregarded him. This version of Paolo has no holes in his game. The downhill pressure that he is exerting also makes his pull-up jumper that much more effective. Like, that's what stood out to me on tape, too, is defenders are conceding the jumper in favor of protecting the paint. They're giving him a cushion when he's in the mid-range, and that's just going to make his mid-range game that much more deadly. This year, he's shooting 42% on pull-up jumpers. That's up 2% from last year. You think about how he was getting it done in the playoffs last year, right? Because his playoff series was so great against Cleveland. He shot 59% on pull-up jumpers. The downhill pressure aspect of it just makes him so much more reliable game to game. Because the pull-up jumper is going to come and go. That downhill pressure, you just can't stop. You can't change it. And so this is a version that we're seeing a fully unlocked Paolo, a guy that can handle, that can play make, that can score at all 3 levels at 6'10", 250 pounds. Carson, I think Paolo could be one of the best offensive players in the NBA. I talked about it in the playoffs last year that I thought we would see a tangible pull-up jumper leap, right? Like, maybe not something, crazy like 5 to 10%, but I thought this, a 2 to 5% leap was doable. But this kind of downhill pressure, he's the total package offensively, man. It makes me, I was thinking about this. You remember last year when, remember that dumbass tweet was going around? Oh my God, dude, this version of Paolo looks like baby LeBron. No, this version.
I saw it again.
This version of Paolo is closer. That's when you can make the comp. Nobody's close to LeBron.
Nobody make the comp. Nobody make the comp, dude. But this is the one thing about Paolo, real quick. I love Paolo. I thought he was an amazing prospect. I preferred Chet. I still prefer Chet. But I've been saying, I think Paolo very well can and should be a top 10 player in the league. Not a top 5 player, in my opinion, but a back half of the top 10 sort of guy. I think he's awesome. I just think people lose their marbles with Paolo. There is a certain subset of people who I think are just in love with his aesthetic and do see something Braun-esque in there. And they just lose their minds, dude. Like, the Braun comp needs to stop immediately. The gap in explosiveness between Paolo and LeBron.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the size of the Atlantic Ocean, Logan. And Paolo's explosive. We're talking about LeBron James, for God's sakes. I don't think that people watched him legitimately if they are making that comparison. And Paolo's a really good playmaker. Again, we're talking about LeBron James here. Everybody needs to chill with that. Also, it is important to note that he had 2 scoring clunkers before the 50-piece. I'm high on Paolo. I do think he's taking a leap. I think he's on a very positive trajectory. Well, that's my point. What does that mean, don't care?
Don't
Like,
care.
this is the thing with Paolo. It's so
Don't
interesting
care.
how certain guys are viewed where they
Don't
can
care.
do
Well,
all good and no wrong.
The interesting thing with Orlando, though, is that's why I think Orlando is really deadly with this version of Paolo, is because their defense is already so great. They don't necessarily need a monster takeover offensive guy. They just need Paolo to be more reliable, right? I know he performed on the playoffs last year, but it was on that outlier pull-up jump shooting. If he is consistently getting downhill this year, it's just going to do a couple of things. Again, it's going to make his scoring night to night just more reliable because he's getting easy stuff at the line and at the rim. But again, it's going to weaponize other things where he's going to be an even better playmaker because of the pressure that he's creating on the rim. But it's going to unlock his perimeter game because you're going to have to pick your poison. You can't play up on him because he's going to blow by you and big body you to the rim. So you're going to have to give him that cushion, and it's just going to unlock Paolo all around. I've always expected that Paolo was going to be one of the top 10 players in the league and could be one of the best offensive players in the league. And I'm not saying he's going to do that this season, but in one offseason to add this much, like to do this in one offseason is really remarkable.
I just think that we're seeing him absolutely take the right direction, right? There's sort of two ways that a guy like Paolo can go, who you look at and you say, okay, he's a physical freight train, but early in his career, he's in love with the pull-up jumpers, and he's playing in a bad spacing situation, but he's in love with the pull-up jumpers, and that makes him inefficient as an offensive number one. You can either remain that way as a player and never really figure it out, or you can realize, wait a minute, hold on a second. Wait a minute here. Hold the phone. Hold on just 1 second. I'm a fucking bulldozer, and nobody can stop me coming downhill. And I think that that's what we're seeing Paolo lean into. We talked about this after his debut, but I always said as a prospect, he was the perfect mix between big and wing. And that makes him the ideal modern power forward offensively. That's what we're seeing right now. He's being used as a screener more, which I like. I like him doing more straight up isolation where he can just play bully ball compared to pick and roll. Like when he has a mismatch, let him attack. Lean in to that physicality, that bully ball. So he's shooting 39% from deep on almost 6 attempts per game. That's impressive, but it's a super small sample size. It's 4 games. What I like is 6.8 restricted area attempts per game this year versus 5.2 last year. What I like is 13 free throw attempts per game. What I like is fewer long mid-range jumpers. What I like is 9 rebounds per game, doing his job on the glass with his physical tools. That's what I love about Paolo. And I do think he's going to be a top 10 guy. He's getting a little bit better. I mean, a decent bit better, but at stuff that makes a big difference ultimately. And if he just keeps improving year after year, and as he matures naturally, and as the spacing around him gets better at playing more bully ball, at when he has better ball handlers alongside him, doing more as a screener, and he's going to naturally continue to improve as a playmaker. I think he's going to be one of the best playmaking forwards in basketball. He's already on that short list. He's a really good passer. That's a superstar. He's not going to average 28, 29 a game this year if we're talking about this leap, but can he give you 24 to 25 on 57, 58% true shooting, whereas last year he was down just under 55% true shooting? I think so. And that's the progression. It doesn't happen all at once. It's year after year getting a little bit better. That's what Paolo's doing right now, and that's huge to me. And he and Chet are both playing at that stamped star level. Again, I don't want to undersell it. Paolo is playing more than a little bit better than last year right now. But, I don't think he's going to be playing at an all-NBA level. But do I think he can play at a top 25-ish level this year? Yeah, I do. I think that he and Chet are going to be one of the best 1-2 punches in the draft we've ever seen. I tweeted out today, I think they'll probably end up being the best since Shaq and Zoe went 1-2 in 1992. Shout out to Zion and Ja. I think Chet has a ceiling that neither Zion nor Ja has. I think Paolo should honestly be better than both those guys. Wemby and Brandon Miller, I'm very high on Brandon Miller. I don't think he has Chet's ceiling. I don't think he quite has Paolo's ceiling. So, yeah, I'm all in. I'm all in on this draft. I love this draft, and I was just thinking the other day how funny it was that all the reporting, day of the draft even, was that Jabari Smith was going to go number 1 overall. I just remember at the time being blown away by that. My mind was boggled. Shout out Jabari. He just never had the ceiling that these dudes have, and we're seeing that. All right, Logan. Last team that we're going to discuss today. The LA Clippers, without Kawhi Leonard, are off to a 2-1 start, and they haven't played walkover competition. They nearly beat the Suns in their opener, then they beat the Nuggets, then they beat the Warriors with Steph. Is their strong start real or fake?
I do think it's real, and it starts with the two-man game with James Harden and Ivica Zubac. Zubac on the season is averaging 23 points, 14 boards, and 4 assists on over 60% true shooting. Dominated Golden State, 18 boards, 6 assists, 23 points. And Harden can still float an offense, man. Like, Harden on the season, 25, 8, and 12. Has not shot particularly well, 36% from the field, 19% from deep. And the Clippers don't get, like, super easy stuff. This is a very heavily perimeter-oriented offense. 29% of their shots are coming at the rim. That would be in the bottom quarter of NBA teams. But I like the two-man game with Harden and Zoo. I think if they spam the pick and roll, which is what I would be doing damn near every possession, it's a really good punch. But I really like the depth here. Norman Powell has been freaking balling, man. He dropped a 37-piece on Denver, had 22 fourth-quarter points. He's averaging 25 a night on the season. And I do like this depth, man. I've been really impressed with the Clippers' defense this year. They're obviously missing something without Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, but they forced Golden State into 22 turnovers. And Terrence Mann, really great ball pressure. I've really been impressed with him. Derrick Jones Jr., Chris Dunn, Norm Powell, all these guys are just playing really hard. So I think they've got a really good 1-2 punch with Big Zoo and Harden. They complement each other. Harden is obviously not a superstar anymore, but he's got the IQ. He's frustrating to watch. I still hate watching Harden play, but
really? When he's on, I like it. When he's off, I hate it. But there's just something so surgical when he's on. Just having complete control of the game like that. I like watching it, actually.
It's more the style, like the foul grifting and the baiting. Well, I don't like guys. I don't like guys that deliberately look for fouls. If they happen organically, I'm okay. But Harden is still looking for it. Like, I can only watch him flare his leg into a defender and airball a mid-range jumper. Like,
I agree. Well, and it's like against the Nuggets, like basically for the game, what does he do? He hooks Aaron Gordon going up, just like trying to draw the foul. Like, I don't like that shit. I'll never like that shit. He's far, far, far from my favorite star to watch. But when he does have full control of things, I think it's kind of fun. And also, it's like, he gets the old guy love for me at this point. Like, prime James Harden, different beast. But when you're talking about, 35-year-old James Harden, it's like I root for the old guys.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, it's not... I don't know. I'm never going to enjoy watching Harden play ball because I just don't like that style. But I still can appreciate and understand that Harden is valuable to an offense with his playmaking, with his high IQ, with his passing. So, I think Harden and Big Zoo are a really good 1-2 punch, and I just think Zoo's underrated. He's one of the best centers in basketball, man. He's a beast. And again, the depth is good. I know that people laughed at Norman Powell when he talked about addition by subtraction, but I think there was some merit to it. Like, they've got some good perimeter defenders here. They've got guys who can score the ball. They've got guys who can space the floor. The Clippers are going to be all right. I think the Clippers are going to be all right, man. Like, they're not a real deal contender to me. But can this team make it the playoffs? Yeah, they can. And that should be the expectation this year.
I think that what we're seeing from the Clippers is pretty real. Kind of real, maybe I would say. They're very solid. And I do think that I underestimated this team. I'm expecting Kawhi to basically miss the whole year. That's what I expected when we made our predictions. I don't know. When I hear undetermined timeline with Kawhi, I just assume the worst, unfortunately. But I underestimated their defense. That's the biggest thing that stands out. Derrick Jones Jr. and Terrence Mann are a hell of a perimeter duo. And then Zoo is just such a phenomenal pure rim protector. I think he remains underrated there. Super small sample size, but players are shooting 6 of 16 at the rim versus Zoo right now. And he leads the league in rebounds, which is big. And Harden's picking up some of the slack on the glass as well because Mann and Derrick Jones Jr. are limited as rebounders. But then what really makes this defense as intimidating as it is that off the bench, you're bringing out Chris Dunn and Nick Batum. I mean, these are defensive hounds. Chris Dunn being a functional offensive player, I mean, it's incredible how long it's taken, to see him. He was always a special defensive prospect, but if he's actually going to knock down his open threes, oh yeah, give me a full serving of that. That is a good role player. And he had a good year last year, but seeing it on a team that has playoff aspirations, it's really fun. And it's honestly super fun on the offensive end, seeing Norman Zubac unleashed. And I was a little bit higher on what this team could do offensively, even without Kawhi, because of Norman Zubac and because Harden is such a good regular season offensive engine, even at this stage. Norm has always just been a nasty scorer, man. I mean, special kind of shooter from beyond the arc and a really good athlete. And I love Zoo. I mean, I've been so impressed with him over the last couple years. It's insane the production that we're seeing from these two right now. I mean, they're both well over 20 points per game on sparkling efficiency, but he just does so much of what you want from a starting big. He is a really good pure rim protector. He is an awesome rebounder. He is a damn good pick and roll finisher. Harden's feeding him nice and easy looks there right now, but he's also an elite post scorer, legitimately awesome post scorer, because he is massive. He's very coordinated. He has really good footwork, and he has the best non-Jokic touch on those push shots and floaters and hooks, everything from 6 to 12 feet in basketball. I mean, last year he was 66% inside the paint, outside the restricted area, even better than Jokic. And it's not on a small number of shots. That's a real part of his shot diet. So he's just a stud, and he's a solid passer. Just really, really good all-around big, underrated. And Harden's giving you 25, 8, and 12, right? It is interesting to just watch him dictate basically every possession, super heliocentric. And he's doing that while he shot horribly. He's 19% from deep. He can definitely play better, and I think this offense can look better. They're 24th in offensive rating right now. They're 3rd in defensive rating. I do still think they're at a bit of a talent deficit compared to some of these other teams in the playoff hunt out west. And I do still worry a bit about them balancing the two sides of the ball. You know, how good of an offense can you produce ultimately with Derrick Jones Jr. and Terrence Mann both starting? I like Zoo. I like Norm a lot. They're not going to continue to play like this. And Terrence Mann's an okay shooter. Derrick Jones Jr. is not a good shooter. Like, that's a little bit of a concern for me. The lack of creation alongside Harden is a little concern, but in some ways he is at his best when he's just fully running the show. But, you know, do you have enough of those two-way players? Because Norm can struggle to defend. That's the question, but I would expect this team to be around 500 instead of the mid-30s wins where I had them. And if Kawhi does return, this is a good basketball team. This is a very good basketball team, honestly, that, probably would be like 6th best team in the West, somewhere in there. But without him, I think they're like a play-in team. I think they're very solid. I think they're in a similar range to the Warriors, but I'm maybe a little bit higher on the Warriors. I really like their depth.
I think I'm a little.
The offensive ceiling is a little
Clippers.
higher for the Dubs, in my opinion, with the shooting they have around Steph this year. You're a little higher on the Clippers?
Zoo makes all the difference to me. Just having a big
Zoo's
body
awesome.
like that.
That's true. That's a tough matchup for the Dubs. I wasn't necessarily thinking if they were to match up as much as I was thinking just within the hierarchy of the West. But yeah, it's definitely not a big gap. They're close. And it's fun to see. They're a really interesting, fun team. And a lot of people took it way too far, man. When Kawhi injury was announced and everybody went to Cooper Flag, I was like, okay, so they're going to have the 13th best lottery odds and they're going to get Cooper Flag. Like, I didn't think they were going to make the playoffs.
Could happen.
I didn't think they were going to be one of the best teams not to.
I mean, but again, that's just going to come down to the lottery. You remember the Baron Davis trade with the Clippers and Cavs? That's the one that I think about. But
and the Hawks got lucky last year. Well, they got Rich Shea, but they got the number one pick.
I was low. I was way too low on the Clips, man. I've been really, really impressed with them, and they play hard. Like this team, and they got a lot of perimeter defense, man. Even like a guy like Amir Coffey, who we didn't give a shout. Like they've got a lot of guys on the wing. So I think I underrated. They're probably the team that I was sleeping on the most, man. Tuck me in and give me a pillow, man. I was sleeping on the Clippers.
I think I underrated them too, and also Logan. Let's not forget Ty Lue, just a stud. Very good coach. So, yeah, they're very solid.
Good coach.
I do think there's a hard ceiling on what they can do, but they're a very solid basketball team. There you have it, folks. Little marathon pod here. I don't know if we can call it a marathon. It's kind of maybe the standard we've set for these NBA pods. But it's so good to have basketball back, dude. I'm so happy. Every day I'm kicking back and I'm watching all these beautiful, beautiful games. And we've got lots of content on it. Of course, as I mentioned, I have the Chet video that just came out the other day. And we are not forgetting about the NFL. in these busy times. So if you want to go back and watch our reaction to all of Sunday's action, please do so. That is on our YouTube channel or across all audio platforms. And we're going to keep the video essays coming about the NBA guys. I talked about one of my favorite prospects in Chet. I think I may be talking about another one of my favorite prospects ever who has blossomed beautifully this year, who we discussed on this episode, who frankly is playing erotic basketball this year that makes me feel things that I didn't know another man could make me feel. So yeah, maybe I'll be talking about that in a video soon. So if you want to be locked in on all that, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you want more of our content, all of our trivia stuff, clips from the show, graphics from the show, follow us across social, TikTok and Instagram at NerdSesh and Twitter at Nerd_Sesh. And as always, if you want to be part of the NerdSesh Discord conversation, then you can join our Discord. The link to that is at the link tree across our social media bios. So with that, as always, appreciate you guys. I've been Carson Brabber.
I have been Logan Camden.
And this was NerdSesh.